Hey guys, how's it going? Brian here. It's been a while since I made a video, but I've had an idea for a video for quite a while, and it sort of came to me last night that now was a really good time to make a video. So today's video is going to be about sort of a personal experience and what it means to sort of go through an emotional crisis as well as a mental crisis. I'm someone that's been through the ringer, so to speak, when it comes to mental illness. Not to say, there's tons of people out there that have been through far worse that I couldn't even imagine, but I try not compare, my pain to others. And, it's our own individual experience and, as well as our own growth period and, our own learning experience. When you're a highly sensitive person, you tend to pick up energies around you, and those can be the most beautiful, light-bearing energies that can inspire you to do great things, and can really provide a lot of good support, spiritually and emotionally. But you can also attract really dark, negative energies, and those have a purpose and there is light within those, but in the time, it seems very convoluted and confusing, and it can make you question things, perhaps your own sanity at times. But, me personally, I've always sort of been a bit of an empath, which basically means that you feel literally everything, and you pick up on energies, you pick up on vibes, and those vibes, they don't really lie. Perhaps our perception of them can sometimes be misconstrued, or can work in favor of our own internal sort of outlooks that we create. And that's the point where we have to separate mind from matter, and understand that our thoughts and our minds, they can either work for us or against us, and whatever's happening in our lives, we can easily complicate matters by simply giving in to our thoughts. And those thoughts are representations of, I suppose, our ego, if you want to call it that. It's a part of us that we want what we want, and it's selfish in nature. And we draw up all these standards in terms of, how we want life to be, and, we resonate with these expectations that sort of guide us, either consciously or subconsciously, through life. And I feel if you subscribe to this mindset and you get too involved with the mind, it definitely can hinder you from feeling the true spirit of things and understanding the true intentions of the flow around you and what all of these vibes and energies mean, because there's a lot of confusion out there. And at 24 years old, I'm in a much healthier place than I was, say 2 or 3 years ago. At that point, I was living in a constant state of chaos, especially emotional chaos, spiritual chaos. I had attracted a lot of dark things in my life, and I wasn't living a wholesome life. I wasn't living up to my true potential, and I wasn't living for my spirit's best interest, And over time, I slowly sort of declined into nothingness, and I hit several rock bottoms, some in the form of physical circumstance, others just by recognizing spiritual lows and points of just inactivity. This manifested in a pretty bad anxiety disorder, paranoia, OCD, depression, those types labels of things, if you subscribe to those labels. But at 24, I'm a lot healthier, and I sort of have a better handle on what's happening. But at the same time, I still mess up. I still have my times. I'm, not to make it all about me, but I guess this is a form of self-therapy in a way. But I'm a very, very emotional person, um, and a very sensitive person. Those are related, but they're not the same. Um, but there's such thing as that's called being emotionally responsible, and when it comes to something like art or music, I honestly think it's okay to and live in the extent of your emotion and to push those boundaries. You know, um, it's okay to reach those levels. But in everyday daily reality and communicating with others, I think you're doing them a disservice if you constantly use your emotionality as a crutch, so to speak, and you formulate this sort of verification in your mind that I can be as emotional and sensitive as I want because that's just me, and um, that can be true. But if it's harming someone else or hurting someone else, or confusing them, then maybe that's not the best way to do things. I think someone who is truly emotionally responsible can control their emotions and can know when they can delve into the depth of all that. But with that being said, we're all human, and we all have folly, we all have fallibility. Is naturally. We learn from mistakes, and we make mistakes, and we relapse on not just drugs or alcohol, but we also relapse on old learned behaviors and ways of doing things that perhaps dominated our life in the past and our outlooks and our belief systems. But over time, we grew from them, and we sort of resurrected ourselves and overcame, the shortcomings that came along with, subscribing to a thought system that was inherently harmful to self or other. Um, Eventually, you reach a point where you surrender to this, and I, I think that's when you can truly be honest with yourself about some fundamental flaw in your personality or way of doing things or belief, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you were doing something wrong. I don't really, I believe in wrong and right, but those are very concrete. I feel like emotion is sort of a very vague. That's not the right word. Emotion is actually a very complex thing, and I think it's okay to feel, and I think it's okay to express that. And I'll never not believe that it's okay to express emotion, but as we get older, perhaps we learn how to better express this in ways that are inherently constructive as opposed to destructive. So that's where I was going with that. I sort of made this video. I had a general idea of what I was going to speak about, but I'm sort of winging this, so I hope I'm not too confusing. Another thing I'd like to talk about is sort of, when you grow into this new self and you adopt all of these new ways of doing things, and when you experience happiness long term, which for me, I haven't until this year I didn't really know what happiness was for several years. Of course, even in the throes of addiction or heavy mental illness, not every moment's miserable. There were a lot of good times, I suppose, but they were sort of masked by this overwhelming negativity that just sort of manifested in the form of fear in my life that I sort of lived out over and over again because I can be very arrogant, and I don't always listen to my conscience, and that's the thing. I don't have an excuse because I know better. And that's the worst part about these little relapses. And I'm not speaking about like substance or whatever. Obviously, that's not the case. I mean relapses in ways of doing things, and just sort of flawed thought systems in the past that governed us. And what I was, I'm so sorry. What I was saying, eventually you get to a point where that sort of fizzes out, and you adapt these new ways of doing things, and hopefully, or in my case, I feel like I'm listening more to the moment and the flow, and I'm existing within the moment and the flow. And anytime that I'm not, it becomes blatantly apparent that I'm not, because there's some sort of internal conflict. And also, physically, I can make my own stomach churn to the point of, not just hunger. I can, I'm so sensitive that, like, my body will start hurting and aching when there's something really fundamentally wrong. I had anxiety so bad in April that I thought I was dying. I was nearly bedridden for a month. I could barely leave the house. That's a little bit different scenario, but it brings up a good point. I tried so hard to get out of the anxiety funk last April, but it had to work through. It was, metaphorically speaking, I suppose it was some sort of not a cancer, but just it was some sort of long winding affliction that had to work its way through me. The difference is when you're sort of selfish and arrogant, and you buy into the whole I can be emotional as all get out and it's okay, and you substantiate your own flaws and folly, and you believe that, then I don't necessarily believe that's growth. I feel like you're just bolstering your own ego and your own sense of righteousness, beyond the truth of the matter and who you really are. And, I've always said, control the controllable. Like, if there's something, and I'm speaking to me, I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to whoever, like, if there's something you can do to make things better, if there's something you cannot do, or rather, if you have any sort of control over anything, and, it's hard to say what that really means, then I would say try to shape up and control yourself, and try to do the right thing for you and definitely for others. I guess that's really just what I wanted to say. Part of this was self-therapy, but maybe it'll help somebody. Lately I have experienced some very high emotions and low emotions. I feel that that's just the nature of the artist, the nature of the empathic person, and the feeling-oriented person. I also, I think a lot, and I overthink, and that sort of is like a, it's like a grand conundrum. It's like I'm backed into a corner sometimes, and I can't always find my way out. But anyway, it's good to be able to speak on these things, and, it's good to recognize when you're in the wrong, and, when you've possibly, had a crisis of sorts. In the past I would just hold it in, and, I would be destructive and, drink or whatever. But nowadays it's honesty and transparency for me, and, I think that's a good personal policy to go by. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Have a Merry Christmas. Peace, my friends.